Welcome back to the Interesting Lawyers Podcast. Today's guest is an old friend and a big-time lawyer. He has offices in Florida, Louisiana, Mississippi, California, Colorado, Tennessee. And he focuses and specializes in property insurance claims. And since there is a national property insurance crisis, I thought he'd be a great guy to have on the podcast. Tom Morgan, good morning. Say hello to our listeners.
Good morning. Thank you for having me on here today. I appreciate it.
Tom, 5 years ago, you had 6 lawyers. You were in one state here in Florida 5 years ago. Now you're in 6 states with 2 more in your sights, and you have 33 lawyers. How on earth did you build and scale your practice so quickly?
I think, first of all, thanks for the shout out in regards to doing that. But the growth has really been a response to the needs of the people. And the fact is that we've been able to place local lawyers in those markets where we saw the need and just replicating the ability to work the files in the same manner. And our office in Miami is the headquarters and a lot of the backbone that supports all the other offices.
It seems that your timing may be perfect, but for the wrong reason, Tom. They're calling for the busiest, craziest hurricane season we've ever seen in the state of Florida. There are these weekly events like hurricanes blowing through Texas, fires in Hawaii, wildfires in California, tornadoes all over the place. I have to tell you, that's like the majority of the evening news almost every night this week. What the hell is going on with our climate? And congratulations on your retirement from that.
In regards to the climate, I can't say anything other than what everybody else says. And unfortunately, we're seeing a change in the climate. We're seeing, unfortunately, greater and stronger storms and more frequent. And that brings into the factor of insurance, unfortunately, for businesses, commercial, as well as residential across the country.
So I get it. More weather, more claims, okay? But why does it have to mean more lawyers? What is it that insurance companies are doing that create this exponential need for more and more lawyers to be able to represent people who have these claims, whether it's to their home or their business?
Unfortunately, it is requiring more lawyers, and I wish it wasn't. The fact is, the storyline would be great if insurance companies were out there and paying appropriately. But what we're seeing is there's a bigger drive to make their profit margins. They have investors, they have shareholders for a lot of them. And what they're doing is they're implementing systems where they can try and minimize the payouts in regards to these claims. And unfortunately, people are not getting what they deserve.
Obviously, property insurance companies, like most others, they're in business to take in as much premium as they can, make as much as they can on their investments, pay out as little as possible, right? And bonus the adjusters and the supervisors who save money that they're given to settle cases, whatever they can save. Don't they get an attaboy or an attagirl? It works?
Yeah, something very similar to that. We're seeing major payouts to CEOs and high executives at some of these insurance companies. They're getting paid millions and millions as bonuses at the end of a year, at the same time that they're complaining that the company's not doing well and that they're not making profits. It doesn't add up. It's a crazy factor that they're making more money on their investment by not paying out on the interest earned on those the investments made. When they finally have to pay out and they pay out a lower amount, the profits are there.
You were telling me about a new law requiring transparency as to how much money CEOs make, okay, of insurance companies. I know we've always talked about this generally. We know they make a lot of money. We know they're in it for the money. Right. But I just saw some statistics that I shared with you, and it seems like these CEOs of these large companies are making literally 9 and 10-figure salaries, together with bonuses, stock, and other benefits. Talk about that, please.
Yeah, Florida now recently has implemented a change in the reporting requirements for a lot of these carriers. And that's also to try and diffuse why some of them are going insolvent. They're trying to say a lot of the carriers that recently went insolvent, there was large payouts to their executives right before they did. These guys are getting 10, 15, $20 million payouts, and yet they're saying our company's broken, we can no longer write policies. It doesn't make any sense.
They get these big payouts, tens of millions of dollars, but ultimately at whose expense? Who ends up not getting that money?
The policyholder. Unfortunately, a homeowner that's forced to go get the policies from these companies, and there's limited number of options out there sometimes, they suddenly don't have a carrier that's going to pay them.
Now, Tom, of course, not every claim is legitimate. Not every claim is really worth as much as people ask for. I know there's overreaching, and I know that there is some degree of fraud. How prevalent is that just across the board?
Number one, I think the fraud argument is a very minute aspect of the overall aspect of claims. The mass amount of claims that are made are valid claims. The question then falls into people have sometimes an inflated personal value of what their claim is worth. And then you have the inflated value that may be given to those that are involved with the claim that have a financial interest. The roofer he's trying to make a higher margin. The contractor may be trying to make a higher margin. And so those things may drive the cost of the claim or the value of the claim up. But at the end of the day, there's a process to reach a value that's reasonable and fair for the homeowner.
Someone has to fix the roof. Someone has to fix the damage to the home, right? So, and I know there's public adjusters who will come in and document for homeowners who don't know how to do that what the damage is. But I noticed that at least here in Florida, their wings have been clipped back quite a bit, these public adjusters, by the legislature, as have the issue of attorney's fees. Can you please talk about that?
Sure. In Florida, there's been a big change over the last 2 years. Number one, especially for attorneys, they have taken away the aspect of being able to recover attorney's fees against the carrier when you're prevailing.
So let me stop you right there. So when you would get a case in the past, you would take it on a contingency fee.
Correct.
And the insurance company, if they were found responsible or if they took responsibility by settling the case at some point, they would have to pay your attorney's fees instead of your client having to reach into their pocket and pay.
Correct.
Do you believe that was fair and that worked well in the system?
That was a very fair system. And I know that we could have modified it to some degree, but the elimination of it completely is really harmful to the homeowners of Florida.
In the 6 states that you're currently practicing in, do they have attorney's fee provisions or no?
They don't, but most of those states have at least a bad faith aspect that allows for the recovery where we can show that the carriers acted in bad faith.
There's hoops that you have to jump through in these other states to get paid anything from the insurance companies, right?
Correct.
And in Florida here now, they're not on the hook for any attorney's fee. So I know there's some ways in litigation that you can create a fee entitlement from the insurance company if you win, but a lot of times, doesn't it now come down to the homeowner or the property owner bearing the expense of whatever repairs that the insurance company doesn't want to pay for?
99% of the time going forward now under this new statute, the homeowner is going to bear the brunt of the expense. The shifting of the fees to the insurance carrier is almost impossible in regards to the property.
So if someone has $5,000 worth of damage to their property and they go to a law firm, not necessarily your firm,
Correct.
Right? If you handle it on a contingency fee and you work your ass off, you might end up with just $2,000, and then the homeowner only gets $3,000. They can't even fix whatever needs to be fixed. What is wrong with that picture?
The picture is exactly that. The fact is that under the new guidelines and statutes set forth by Florida, the normal person having a small claim in their home is not going to be able to find any representation.
What about the other states where you practice? Is it the same answer?
In some of those states it is. Tennessee, Mississippi, it's very hard to show the bad faith aspects. So in those states, we are working more high value, more commercial losses in those states versus the small kitchen leak or bathroom leak type of claim. But in Florida, where most homeowners are used to, hey, if I had a problem, I could go find assistance, they can't do that anymore. Like you said, a $5,000, $10,000, even $15,000 claim, by the time you pay out the expenses to the people necessary to build up that case and prove it, and then take out your legal fees, there's nothing left for the homeowner.
So let me make sure that we understand this clearly. In a lot of these losses to residences, it's just not worth it as a business proposition for any lawyer to take on that case. Unless the homeowner can start writing checks for hourly attorney's fees, which would blow way past the amount of the claim pretty quick. Doesn't make sense, right?
It doesn't make any sense.
So what I'm hearing is that if it's a business that has a $100,000 claim on a warehouse and they have money, that's not an issue. They can get law firms all day long, and I know you do a lot of commercial claims, right?
Correct.
But the little guy, the homeowner who has a small claim, they may be the ones who really get screwed.
The businesses are going to get screwed too. Unfortunately, it's going to affect everybody. But the small guy is always the guy who gets impacted first and the worst.
So let me ask you, I'm sure you've had these conversations already with individuals about their homes and business owners about their property, about the fact that you cannot accept the case and why. You've had those conversations, right?
We've had those conversations. We're having them constantly every day when they call.
Okay.
Public adjusters are trying to bring us their clients, and we're unfortunately not able to assist in a lot of cases.
My question is, how are these claimants, how are they responding to what you're telling them?
They're upset. They want to know why. They want to know why, especially the people who we've represented in the past and have come to us and said, Tom, you did a great job for me last time, a couple of years ago. I now have this new problem. How can you help me out? And I say to them, unfortunately, your claim right now, value-wise, there's just too much effort that's going to go into it, too much cost. I just financially can't do it as a business.
Now, every year when the insurance companies come back to the legislature, in whatever state it is, first of all, don't they have a huge lobby and a huge presence in all state legislatures to try every year to continually get the laws changed in their favor?
They have a massive, massive amount of money. And we saw it when they all were backing DeSantis in regards to pushing for the reforms in the insurance legislation. And that's what they did. Just they have more money than the plaintiff lawyers that everybody wants to scream and yell about. They have more money than anybody in regards to the insurance representation for homeowners or the building contractors. They have more money, and more money wins generally.
Okay, but I know that Florida had sweeping reform, and it wasn't just about attorney's fees. They changed a lot of things about negligence cases where people get hurt as well. Anything that involves insurance claims and money. But they came in and they basically cleaned house in Florida and got everything they wanted. How did that happen at least under the DeSantis administration?
Number one is they had a very nice setup where it was a super Republican House, and so they were able to get basically anything that DeSantis wanted got passed. And so, but one of the things they were pushing for, they said this was going to allow premiums to go down, more carriers to come into the state, provide more access to insurance, and so far that really hasn't been proven so far to be true. As well as the changes they had made the year before, they never allowed that to actually be implemented long enough to see whether those changes would have been a factor to assist or not either.
Is that by design or incompetence? What do you think?
I don't want to say incompetence. I think it's a misunderstanding. I think unfortunately, the legislatures in Florida don't fully understand what really goes on in the insurance market. And I see that when I personally went up there to lobby to some degree. You explain to them exactly how these claims process and how it affects the little guy owning his own home. And they don't get it. They see it as the insurance is doing great things. They're providing services. But you got to remember, insurance is not a charity. It's a business, and they're going to pick and choose, and they're going to use everything they can to their advantage to make a profit.
And they're going to throw their money at the lobbying and legislators and campaign contributions and whatnot, right?
Correct.
And they're going to try to power their way through. Is this everything that you just told me? Is that what's going on nationally with legislatures as well?
We're seeing it.
Misunderstanding?
We're seeing a lot of it in Louisiana because of their recent troubles as a result of the hurricanes there. They're trying to make a push. They're trying to become somewhat more similar to Florida. Luckily, that has not happened yet. But again, I think it's misinformation in regards to the understanding of what's really going on with the claims process versus what's going on through the litigation. Everybody points to the litigation side of it as a problem. The reality is litigation's there because the insurance is not doing what they're supposed to be doing in processing and handling these claims properly.
For time eternal, the insurance industry has blamed lawyers and lawyers' fees and volumes of lawsuits for this insurance crisis. Okay, whatever the crisis du jour happens to be.
Right.
Lawyers, on the other hand, turn around and blame the insurance carriers, right? Now, early on in your career, and I think this is a really important part of your experience because it really makes you more objective, is you used to do insurance defense work, right?
I did a lot of insurance defense work.
Your father, who's a bit of a legend in South Florida, has practiced, 60 years or something like that
My dad,
before he retired?
a couple of years ago, got to celebrate his 50th year, so he's 52, 53 years now.
So you know how the insurance companies think, and you know how they message their lawyers and how they communicate their position. So you've been on both sides of that coin, right?
Yeah, 100%. For many years, I did both defense and plaintiff work with my father. He was predominantly a defense lawyer, so I was assisting him with that, and at the same time trying to build out my plaintiff practice until eventually we grew overnight in regards to the property.
So knowing what you know, knowing all sides of this issue, and having worked both sides of this issue, and dealt with clients on both sides of the issue, who's right, who's wrong in this blame game between insurance companies and attorneys over rates, claims, laws, etc.?
I'd say, look, you can definitely put some blame on both sides as to certain things. There's definitely some lawyers out there that have set a bad example for everybody. But the problem is the insurance company points to the small number of those and makes it seem like it's the majority, and it's not. And the fact is that there's going to be, like you said earlier, some fraud in regards to certain claims. Again, they vilify those, they make those billboard images as if it's happening every day with every single claim. The carriers are unfortunately evaluating things not on a personal level, but on a business level. And so they look at a claim, they're looking at it as a number, and they just want to see it as this is what we're willing to pay out, this is what we're trying to make in regards to keeping in regards to reserves. And the general public doesn't have an understanding that it's a business, and they miss out on that.
But they get a lowball offer. The insurance company digs their heels. And if the policyholder doesn't like it, the carrier says words to the effect of, hey, have you heard of that new restaurant, that new sushi place? So sue me. And they have to go and hire a lawyer.
And as we know, actually don't go and hire a lawyer. Most people take whatever the insurance company has told them as fact. They say, hey, carrier told me my claim's not covered. I assume it's not covered, and they don't do anything about it. It's the small percentage that actually turn around and fight against the carrier. And by doing that, they reach out to a lawyer or public adjuster to assist them in regards to putting through their claim. But the reality is the bulk of people accept what they've been told. And a lot of our clientele have sat back and not done anything, and suddenly they see our ad, or they were told by a neighbor or something that we assisted, hey, you had the same problem, you should be seeking out assistance and getting help. And that's what happens.
Is that still true, the small percentage? I'm surprised to hear that. Just because, whether you're on the internet or the interstate, you are showered by advertisements, posts, and whatnot from law firms that do property insurance work. But is that still true? A very few, small percentage actually will go to a lawyer and pursue it to get what they're entitled to?
Yeah, I think the prevalent aspect is they don't like hiring a lawyer. They're scared by it. They don't understand the process. They think they immediately are going to be in court the next day. And so they'll do almost anything to avoid it. They'll either accept what's been offered, or when they call and complain, they'll take whatever the next small amount that's offered to them and close it out.
So on property insurance claims, what are the three most common reasons or excuses that insurance companies use to deny claims?
Number one is the classic exclusion. Unfortunately, your loss doesn't fall under your coverage, even though you have an all-risk policy, which basically means covers everything except those things that are specifically excluded. And most people don't have a full understanding of what their policy is. Most of them don't ever read their policy, and so they'll take whatever the insurance company tells them as being true in regards to that, hey, they told me it's not covered, it's not covered.
What's the second one?
Second thing would be, look, we evaluated your loss, it's under deductible. And most people's deductible is anywhere from $2,500 to $7,500. And somehow you can have a major damaged roof, and that falls under the deductible.
Both sides have different numbers, and it turns out to be a disagreement about the value of the claim, right?
The homeowner generally doesn't have any number. The homeowner is called in, the insurance company comes out, takes a look, and suddenly sends them a letter saying, we've decided that you're covered, but this value is under deductible or just barely over it.
Right.
And we appreciate you as a customer.
And that's their way of saying that we're going to play the numbers game and hope that
you don't come back.
You don't come back and sue us. But enough people don't come back to make it cost effective for them, even to have to defend lawsuits by the people who do.
100%. That's a numbers game.
What's the third reason, Tom?
The third thing is the denial would come to just flat out. They've sent somebody out there and they've determined that it's an unrelatable issue. Most common thing I can use is the roof. Hey, we have damaged tiles on our roof. Somehow the insurance company is going to tell you that it's due to somebody that was walking on your roof. Most people don't have anybody go up on their roof unless they're up there to look at damages. And you get this crazy fact pattern of these tiles can only be broken by foot traffic. This roof is damaged by some unknown cause that's unrelated to a storm or other event that would be covered by your policy, and they just simply deny the claim.
I've heard these arguments from insurance companies before that, oh, that damage was not caused by anything that's covered under our policy. It was old, it was caused by water, and this is a wind claim. There's this and there's that. And you literally get down to the nitty gritty of it, and it's a battle of the experts, a battle of the plumbers, and
Right.
the contractors.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly. The biggest argument they make outside of that is pre-existing. Oh, come out to your home, you have water stains and leaks in your home. They come out and they go, unfortunately, this water problem is something that pre-existed the recent event, and pre-existing damages are not covered.
And they take the position that, look, pal, you've needed a roof for a long time. Okay, now you're trying to cash in and get your new roof from us, but nothing really happened from the storm that wasn't already there. Words to that effect?
100%. And the fact is that the carriers, they have the right to go out there and inspect these properties. They're starting to do that more now, but years ago, up until recently, there's no inspections. People went to their agent, they put in for a policy, and you generally put in, if it was a recent home, you had your 4-point inspection done or appraisal done for the purchase. But most people, nobody was going out there and looking at the home over and over again, but the carriers were charging you policy, they were accepting the coverage, and then they were trying to backlog it basically when person put in a claim saying, oh, we think your roof is older than it should have been, and you should have done something about it. And it's, you wrote us a policy, you provided insurance, and now I have a loss. How can you go backwards in time?
So it sounds like insurance companies are playing this insidious and evil game where someone has a loss. The insurance company does not send somebody right out to document the damage that they ultimately have to pay for. That would become evidence in the case against them if they didn't pay the claim. So they just sit back and do nothing. And then when the insured finally gets around to it, takes some pictures or hires a lawyer, the carrier claims, hey, improper documentation, right? You didn't document this lost property, so we're not paying.
Correct.
What's wrong with that picture, Tom Morgan?
There's a duty on behalf of the insurance companies to go out there and do a proper inspection and evaluation of your claim. It's not on the homeowner to necessarily have to prove their losses every time. They need to substantiate their losses with documentation, but the carrier has a duty to their insured, their policyholder, to go out there and properly evaluate and make a decision on the claim.
I read an article the other day that insurance companies are starting to use drones to take photographs. I know drones are great for some things, but what they're doing is they're using it at the underwriting stage before they even issue a policy or before there's even a loss or a claim. And they're telling people, if you want insurance from us, according to our drone's observations, you need to replace your roof before we give you insurance. Have you heard nightmare stories like that where they get out ahead of it and start screwing people before there's even a claim?
So what's going on with drones, the technology with drones has gotten better. So it's being used on both sides. In regards to the underwriting aspects, I don't agree with it per se. If it shows flat out disrepair or damage that's easily visible by a drone, that's one thing. But they're trying to go back and nitpick small cracks and so forth to say that the roof was not properly in shape at the time that it was written, the policy was written. The bigger thing is they're trying to use Google Earth photographs. They're trying to ask people to take pictures of their own roofs on a phone and submit them. I don't know how many people are going to actually get up on a ladder and properly be able to document their roof. You have a lot of changes going on with taking the structure of proper inspections and evaluations out of people's hands and trying to use technology only. And it's really, if a picture is overcast or a picture is fuzzy or it's showing one side of a roof but not the other, is it really a proper portfolio of that property.
There's always something for the lawyers to argue over, isn't there?
There's generally something very good to argue over.
From the insurance company's point of view. Let me ask you a question. They're sending drones out to look at homes aerially to decide whether to even accept the risk. But then when there's damage, are they going to send the drone out again to evaluate the damage, or do they just leave that to the homeowner who may or may not hire someone of your caliber? You probably have an air force of drones at your firm, don't you?
We have our experts that like to go out there and do detailed inspections. And the fact is that, unfortunately, the carriers in many instances are using those photos that they took initially to evaluate the claims without really a proper follow-up documentation. A lot of times the people they send out, I have adjusters get out there all the time. They will not get on the roof. They're trying to take pictures from the ground up, from a distance. They don't want to they didn't bring a ladder. If it's a two-story building or structure, they don't want to get up there. They say the liability risk is not there for them.
But what I'm getting at is, let's say you buy an expensive house. You want it insured. So the insurance company sends out a drone, hovers over your house. You think they're looking in your windows. They probably are as well.
Yeah.
And they evaluate your roof, and then they come back and they either give you a quote or say you need to do this or that, take off the solar panels before we write a policy, whatever it might be. Then, years later, you have a loss from a windstorm, let's say. Are they going to send that same drone back out there to survey the damage and document it so they can pay it? Or do they have other things in mind?
No, more than likely, they're not sending anybody out there other than the standard adjuster. And under Florida law now, they can ask the homeowner to just take their own photos and submit them for purposes of the claim, so they're not even sending somebody out.
But is that happening nationally as well?
Nationally, it's not happening as much. I am seeing in Louisiana and California that they do not want to do roof inspections in person. They're using drones for the most part, and that's their indication is
the insurance
liability.
companies.
The insurance companies are not. That's because they're saying they don't want the liability of their work, of the person going out there to be in those circumstances of going up and down a ladder.
Yeah, but sometimes even a drone isn't effective. If there's a hole in the roof or some rotting underneath the roof tile, and it's very nuanced, right? So they might not capture that.
The issue with the drones that you don't get is the lifting issues that go on after a major storm.
So what do you mean lifting? Explain.
So when one of the major factors in a storm is a lot of people come out, look at your house after a storm, you look at your roof for what you can see, all the shingles seem to be there or the tiles seem to be in place. You go, okay, we got lucky. The reality is if that storm was battering for several hours or a few hours against your home, those tiles are being shaken and loosened. And you can get damage there where you're not going to see it for a period of time. You're not going to see it until a heavy rainstorm or maybe a period of time where other small wind events come into play and shift those tiles or shift those shingles in regards to what's going on and allow water to eventually get into the property. And drone's not going to show you that.
That's your position on cases like that when the photographs look normal. And I take it the insurance company's position is fraud.
Their position is there's no loss here. There's nothing to cover. Anything you're trying to say to us is you're asking basically what you said. It's a fraudulent claim.
Tom, whenever I tried cases, I might have tried one or two property cases, but involving automobiles probably. But when I tried cases, my goal as a trial lawyer was to keep the jury awake, keep them excited, show them great photographs, dazzle them with medical images or PowerPoints, keep them alive. I happened to have the pleasure of sitting in on one of your firm's trials, which they won against the insurance company, but the whole thing was about one roof tile in one place being the source of a leak, and it was hard for me to stay awake, and I just feel badly for you because it's not the most exciting thing from a performative point of view. Even the best lawyer in the world may not be able to present anything exciting to a jury. They're not exciting cases, are they?
Listen, it's not juicy like a big injury loss, a person who's been in a tragic event, or even we do some business claims. You get shareholders fighting over something. There's usually some backstory that goes to it, and that's exciting. In the property realm, you're talking about an asset, a piece of property. It's not the most exciting thing. So you've got to find a way to get the juries to buy in and understand, put them in the same place, and really try to give some backstory as to why is this event so impactful on our client. And that's what has to be done in regards to trying to make that connection.
Whether it's a wind loss or a water loss, and that's probably most of your where your losses fall in, it all comes down to water getting into the house somehow, maybe even through a leaking pipe, and then the mold comes along, and that's the real nightmare.
Yeah, a lot of instances, that's a big problem.
How many water claims do you have that where carrier drags their feet, they don't do anything, the homeowner doesn't know any better, and next thing you know, they have a mold problem and a much bigger claim? How do those cases play out, and do they get settled or paid, or how does that work?
Yeah, outside of doing a large event like a hurricane or a major hailstorm, the bulk of our claims are probably involving water. So you have a kitchen pipe that breaks, you get or a bathroom or a shower pan leak. Those are events that not only does it cause problems maybe with the use of that area of the home, but you've got the water damage that's been incurred, and of course water over a period of time is going to build mold, algae, things of that nature, make it more difficult for cleanup, sanitizing the area, and so forth. So those are claims that we're doing thousands every year on in regards to. And yes, they get paid, they're covered, but again, it goes back to what you just said, which they're not the most exciting things. It's technical, it's having a plumber come in, it's having maybe an engineer come in and talk about the traveling of the water. How does this grow? Why is it trapped in back wall? Why is drywall a factor versus if somebody has actual concrete?
Yeah, those cases just don't excite me very much. But the ironic thing is the way that I met you. I met you in a case involving a disco ball.
Yes,
And
famous disco
you'll
ball.
recall this. My guy is in a nightclub in South Beach. He's in the VIP room, and the disco ball suddenly falls and hits him in the head. And he hurts his head. He goes to the hospital. He claims a brain injury. And unfortunately for him, he had recently gotten his pilot's license. And when he reported to the FAA that he'd sustained a head injury, they revoked his pilot's license, and the guy came to hire me. And the case was being defended by your father, Tom Morgan Sr., who a real piece of work, this guy. I say that lovingly, and he reminds me so much of my father. I think I've told you that before. Same personality. I love the guy. Anyway, so I walk in to the courtroom to try the case, and there he is with his son, Tom Jr. That's you. And I said, Morgan and Morgan. And it wasn't the same Morgan and Morgan that listeners may be thinking. That's another national firm, same name, great lawyers at both firms, I will say that. Anyway, I had to hire a rigging expert, and we fought over the disco ball. And I remember the nightclub couldn't come up with a disco ball, but they said that, oh, it was styrofoam inside, it only weighed a few pounds. My guy described it as much heavier, but you couldn't come up with it. It wasn't your fault. But literally, you and I met over this disco ball case. And the way the case ended, you might imagine, because of pretty big damages, if it's a pilot, his whole future earnings, he can't make that, there was a big claim. So guess how Tom, your dad, defended the claim? I don't know if you remember this. They apparently had some surveillance on my client. My client claimed that he couldn't fly planes anymore, so he went to work for his dad's company, and he was working hard there, and he had a big wage loss and all of that. So the surveillance was an hour and a half long, and your dad played the entire thing in front of the jury, and I'm sitting there pulling my hair out, because what does it show? It shows my client pulling up in a Mercedes convertible to Starbucks with his sunglasses on the phone. He goes in, he gets his latte, and he comes and sits outside, and he puts his feet up, and the whole time he's on the phone, and he's texting, and he's living the good life. And that's all it showed. Right? That's all. It didn't show him doing anything that he claimed he couldn't do. That's usually why surveillance is used. But I think the point of it, because I'm still trying to figure this out, was the message was, look, this guy, he's comfortable. He lives a comfortable life. He's fine. There's nothing wrong with him. And I just remember I went and told my partner about it, and he looks at me, and he knows your dad too, and he says, Tom Morgan is a genius. And I agree with him. And you know what? The verdict really spoke loudly there, because I got a very low verdict. So for you guys, it was a win. I could still save face and tell people I won the case. But the great irony about the disco ball case, and Tom, I've bought this for you. I'd like to give this to you as a token of today's podcast. You could use it on your Christmas tree or whatever, and let it remind you of that case where you guys got the better of me, but that's how the game is played. Do you remember that trial?
I remember that case very well. You were Mr. Technology. You came in with at the time, technology in the courtroom was not very common, and you said, "I'm all technology. Everything's paperless." And then on the first day, in the first hour, we had technical difficulties.
Of course. Of course.
But that case, you did well for your client. We wanted a zip on that. That was a personal thing. We felt that he didn't really have the injuries. But yeah, you probably didn't get the verdict you wanted to some degree. But I think the video that my dad presented was exactly what you said. It was to show this kid's going about his day every day the same. There's nothing in there that looks like a hindrance to him. And why is he making this complaint?
It was brilliant of him to make the jury sit through that whole surveillance film, I'm telling you. And you really got the better on that case, although I appreciate your kind words. But ironically, and I'll close it this way, there was a hurricane in the Atlantic Ocean that was approaching Miami during this trial. And the judge started getting really nervous toward the end of the trial. He wanted the trial to end before the warnings went up. And I'll never forget the last day of the trial. We were ready for openings. The judge is like apoplectic, freaking out. We got to get this done. We got to get the jury out of here. It's going to be a warning, this and that. Intense pressure on both sides, but we still got it done. You got your result, and I end up in downtown Miami at 5:30 in the evening, terrified for my life outside the courthouse with a hurricane warning about to be issued. So thanks for those fond memories, Tom Morgan. But it's been great to have you on the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming to visit us.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed it, and I do want to do panels and things like that, and I'd love to have you back in the future. You're always welcome here.
Hey, if you had a panel, that'd be great. I'd love to be a part of that.
Super, great. So that wraps up today's episode of the Interesting Lawyers Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.